Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Vortex, where lies and falsehoods are trapped and exposed. I'm Michael Voris, coming to you from the We the Patriots conference in Boise, Idaho, where loyal citizens of the Republic have gathered for a series of talks and presentations on the state of affairs and what can be done. But inside discussions with some folks here, a theme is emerging that Christianity is being, or perhaps has already been, replaced by a kind of political religion, where the Constitution is viewed as more important than the Scriptures. Of course, no one here at this heavily Protestant-attended event is going to come right out and say that, but that's the undercurrent, at least among some, and by some we mean not a few. America is a Protestant nation, period. That's where its roots are. That is the underlying ethos which permeates, or at least permeated, every institution in the country. But what exactly is the Protestant ethos? What is the underlying philosophical principle which flows through the bloodstream? Well, ultimately, it's a rejection of authority. What Martin Luther unleashed in the 16th century as a purely theological revolution did not remain purely theological for very long. Eventually, it worked into the political arena, and there it sits today, dominating so-called conservative evangelical politics. Protestantism, meaning all 40,000 different contradictory denominations, have simply thrown in the towel on getting to the bottom of the question of truth. Each one of those religions, and be clear, each denomination is its own religion, proposes contradictory principles and beliefs to all the other religions. Yeah, sure, they have some beliefs in common. They have some beliefs in common with Catholicism. But they also have various beliefs in total opposition to each other. That's why they're different denominations. And over here in America, a decision was made to simply allow erroneous and contradictory beliefs to coexist side by side and have no involvement from the government. Good in some ways, but ultimately destined for total cultural collapse, because it is truth which is ultimately being ignored. So the Scriptures become a benchmark for perusing through and cherry-picking whatever verses support your personal interpretation for your worldview, including your view of God and whatever morality your God demands of you. Of course, only one of two courses could be followed in this sort of milieu. Either slug it out and determine which religion is truthful and the right one, or ignore the theological and philosophical contradictions and just move on. It was obviously the latter course that was chosen. In short, the proverbial can was being kicked down the road. Well, now, drum roll please, as a culture, we are at the end of that road. The bill has come due. Protestantism, because of that choice, has had to create a new religion that there could be much more agreement on. Politics is the new religion, and the Holy Writ is the Constitution. If the Constitution says it, then it's gospel, so to speak, or at least it's treated as such. And while there are, of course, many things to celebrate about the freedoms enumerated, of course there are, in many cases they are so elevated so as to surpass the natural moral law. Protestantism, bereft of any authentic understanding of objective truth, philosophically and theologically, is forced to fall back on political language and enshrine it as almost religious. So they end up defending Satanists, for example, trying to pervert children because, the First Amendment, as though that is the ultimate source of truth. Standing in the public square and denouncing them accomplishes nothing, but it is the fallback position. But that approach fails to take into account the more foundational theological reality that man is fallen. It's not like man sits and argues in the public square until the truth is arrived at and then corresponds his moral choices accordingly. Political Protestantism denies the necessity of grace, and substitutes it with the need for political activism. It makes glancing appeals to Scripture, of course, but never ventures into the real nitty-gritty where the war is actually won or lost. That's why you always hear Jesus this and Jesus that all over this kind of world of politics, but you never hear that Jesus condemns divorce and remarriage or contraception. Those two hot-button issues are completely avoided because they would splinter the theologically weak compromise that has been agreed upon. mention Jesus, talk about Judeo-Christian values, but never actually define what any of that actually means. Don't stir the pot. There's a nation to save, damn it. After all, Father Martin Luther said we interpret scriptures for ourselves, and that's the only authority. By the way, as a quick aside, you ever wonder why Protestantism, built on the premise of protesting the Catholic Church's authority, follows a crazy Catholic priest? Just asking. Anyway, so what we have now is a culture where, because the Constitution blesses it, people have a right to promote evils as legitimate objectives. That is not in accordance with natural moral law, despite all the grandstanding and chest thumping. The Founding Fathers were not perfect. They were fallen men just like everyone else. They didn't possess the gift of prophecy. They couldn't look 250 years down the road to today and think that freedom of religion would extend to Satan worship in public schools. They couldn't look 250 years down the road to today and think that freedom of speech would extend to giving drag queens the right to have 10-year-olds slip dollar bills into their G-strings. But because of the way the Constitution is elevated to near divine status by political Protestantism, they have no choice but to grant that those people do have those rights. Now, they might fight against them, but they have the right because the Constitution says so. Sure, people have the ability to do wrong and promote evil. Yeah, of course they do. That's what hell is ultimately for. But they do not have a moral right to propose violations of the natural moral law as protected just because the Constitution says so. Let's be clear, it does say so, or at least it doesn't say no, but, and this is where Catholicism necessarily parts ways on the political front with Protestantism, Catholics and Catholic teachings subscribe to natural moral law across the board. The Protestant heresy rejects that, bowing instead to the authority of the Constitution over and above God's laws when they come into conflict. This is why official Protestantism has caved on every moral question of the day, and Catholicism has not. We are rooted in God's law, His natural moral law. Protestantism is rooted in a belief that the Constitution is God's law. They're wrong, politically, theologically, morally, and philosophically. And all you have to do is just look around at the current cultural collapse. The worship of America is killing America. Coming to you from the We the Patriots Conference in Boise, Idaho, this is Michael Voris. God love you.